Season 2 of Diablo 4. Let's go over everything that you want to know about that got revealed in the gameplay that you guys are seeing in the background with the brand new developer update. So it's going to be kind of rapid fire really quick. This was all taken from the developer update live stream that they did. We're going to condense all of the important information into one short video. So starting right off, that's where this footage is coming from. So starting right off, the first thing is there is going to be a new quest line. You can see that there's this new Hunter Ares over here, and it's going to be voice activated by Gemma Chan. So that's also Captain Marvel, if you guys have watched that. Nonetheless, the most important thing that I think most people want to know is these brand new powers. So how do these powers work? So to acquire these, you're going to have to go in these like newer areas. It's almost kind of like an area infected, similar to Helltides, but they're going to be vampires around. So starting right off, the most important thing is, what do these powers do? They did not reveal all 22 powers, but we do have some of them here to share. So starting right off, the most important thing is the powers here. So it looks like we can equip 5 powers, but there are ones where we can activate them and have them inactivated. You can see that there are these packs that have these kind of points into. So we have one that looks like some sort of a like skull symbol-ish. Then we have a cup, and then we also have another one that says like 2 out of 2. I'm not sure what like the icon is for that, but you guys can see what that looks like. I don't know. It kind of looks like just like a sword, maybe in some sort of like some spikes. Anyways, there's 3 different like little packs that we have in terms of like these. Think of it kind of like a color or something that needs to match up. And these are going to be on our items. So we have to be able to match those with whatever powers that we want that require certain like cups or skulls in terms of like the resource required. But nonetheless, what is really cool with these powers is these are going to be available for all of the classes. Previously in the season 1, those Malignant Hearts, they were locked to the classes sort of. There were some ones that were generic, but these ones are all going to be generic, so that's actually a really nice feature. So basically, if there's one really cool power, you're going to be able to get it across all of the classes here. So on top of that, what are the actual powers that we have? So starting right off, let's go over the ones we do know of, and you'll see that they have these activation costs, and these are going to be on your armor. So your armor might roll with 3 of the little spiked I don't know, spiked helm is kind of what it looks like. And then there's the cups, and then there's the skull, right? So starting right off with the Vampiric power, Blood Boil, they show them at level 1, and it looks like we can engage with the season mechanic at level 1, which is pretty cool. But nonetheless, Blood Boil, it says level 1, place into the Sanguine Circle. When you overpower an enemy, you spawn 3 volatile blood drops. Collecting a volatile blood drop causes it to explode, dealing some sort of amount of damage to enemies around you. And then every 45 seconds, your next skill is guaranteed to overpower. One thing just as a note is they said that they're going to be looking at overpower, and this is going to be happening on October 10th. So some of these may be better for certain classes than others, because right now, Rogue, and doesn't really have a source of like good overpower, whereas Druid or Barbarian, you can get it a little bit more consistently. Next up though, for another Vampiric power, we have a Cursed Touch. We have a lucky hit up to a 50% chance to inflict Vampiric Curse on enemies. Afflicted enemies have a 15% chance to spread it to other enemies. Vampiric Curse stored souls deal 200% increased damage. So again, some of these are a little bit more vague, but this sounds similar to maybe like the Barber. It like stores the damage, and it maybe like explodes, but it could spread. So that's kind of cool that you can have kind of maybe similar effects. Oh, by the way, if you guys are wondering, are the Malignant Hearts making a return? There are going to be Malignant monsters in the game. However, I don't think that they're going to have the same drops like the Malignant Hearts that we can socket in. They didn't show any sockets of the Malignant Hearts while also having this gameplay, but there's also another power called Metamorphosis here, and it says place into the Sanguine Circle, evade, or it says when you evade, you turn into a cloud of bats, becoming unstoppable for a set duration, and the enemies along your path take 66 to 98, 10% physical damage and are inflicted with Vampiric Curse. So you can see you can maybe incorporate the Metamorphosis with the Cursed Touch, so you can have that like stored, the stored souls deal increased damage, so you can get even more damage on your opponents there. So that's one little thing there. Now on top of that, we also have these packs. So I guess this one is called Ferocity. So this is Pack of Ferocity, which kind of matches the emblem. So you can add the pack to a helmet, chest, gloves, armor, boots, or pants. So basically, it lets you apply those requirements to fit whatever the activation cost is required for those. It's kind of what I would consider unnecessary complexity, but you're going to have to match those certain things in order to use maybe those powers. On top of that, there are going to be newer monsters, and the reason why I put it in air quotations is these monsters technically exist in the game. They are reskinned. They are going to have some newer abilities, but we'll have to wait and see if that actually makes a difference, because technically the Malignant Hearts also had those Malignant monsters, which kind of had different stuff, but it was a face roll. We really didn't see too much in terms of being able to interact with the Malignant monsters via just like a new gameplay mechanic. But these bosses that are going to be coming out will actually have some brand new mechanics. We can see one of the brand newer bosses over here. And on top of that, they showed off some of the gameplay where like there's new like skulls that you can collect. There's going to be these other forms of currency that you're going to be required to get towards some of the newer endgame bosses, and you're going to have to go to some of these newer areas. So on top of that, there's these new things called the Hunter's Acclaim, and this is actually kind of cool. It seems like they are actually rewarding us a little bit better, and as you progress in here with this Hunter's Acclaim, some of these will have specific rewards. Some of them, I mean, obviously just getting a yellow item is like whatever, it doesn't really matter, but some of the other things, you can just get some legendaries, cool. And then you can see on the one that is on number 9, that one actually does have one of the newer powers. So moving on, you can see what one of the powers is. So we have Vampiric Power, the Accursed Touch. So you're going to be getting some of these via these brand new Hunter's Acclaims, and on top of that, you can get them via the newer mechanic. So in terms of the updates for the game, and some of these are going to apply to the non-season, like the Eternal Realm. So this is kind of what they showed off. So they showed off the launch content progression, which is what we currently have in the game, and then they showed off what is basically changed. And I'll kind of like do this so you guys can kind of see what the differences are. They mentioned that they are massively buffing the whispers, so that's going to be kind of like similar to the bounty system. We're going to be getting way more gold with it, and on top of that, XP in the Hell Tides as well as the whispers will also increase. And on top of that, the glyph XP is going to be increased by 40%. So the main difference is, instead of doing what we did before, which was essentially just Nightmare Dungeons towards the endgame, there is kind of some more endgame content. So we're going to be able to do the Echoes of Varshan and the show of kind of the level progression system that they implemented in here. There's going to be a few new bosses. They mentioned 5 of them. They will drop the Uber Uniques that, you know, we had previously, like Shaco. There's also going to be newer uniques coming into the game, but that won't be revealed until the 10th. They're also going to do a massive overhaul on the uniques, and I'll give you guys the rundown of the brand new unique powers once they actually release the info on what those actually do. And if you guys want to see it, if you're new here, subscribe, and as soon as it comes out, I'll give you guys the footage of the brand new uniques, because that's one area where I felt the game really was lacking in terms of content with the uniques. A lot of them were just absolute trash in terms of min-maxing. There was no point, right? But nonetheless, there are going to be these newer bosses, and you cannot just go and fight the boss and just get the uber unique to drop. How it works is you need to collect basically fragments. My guess is a system similar to maybe Path of Exile, where you have to get fragments, and eventually you can actually get them and maybe go through a portal, some sort of mechanic where you have to collect, and then you get to go fight the boss. There is going to be basically like an Uber Duriel, and they said it's not going to be as hard as Uber Lilith, but nonetheless, that is what's going to be dropping the brand new Uber uniques, as well as some of the other characters. They are also increasing the item power by 100, essentially. You technically could go over 820, but now we can get 920 item power. So basically, even if you're playing on the Eternal Realm, now you're still going to be able to get some sort of a power. So you get more like numbers, essentially, is what it comes down to. It's more important on like weapons than really armor, because armor is just going to give you extra armor. But in terms of it reaching another breakpoint to show off like, extra crit chance, like, on rings, you can only default roll 5%, but if you upgrade to 5 out of 5, you can go to like 7.5. I'm not sure if this is going to increase those numerical stats as well. That's something to mention. They showed off Uber Duriel over here, so this is one of the newer bosses. Technically, Duriel exists in the game, but this is going to be like more so a newer variant, hopefully, and it's going to have actual new mechanics. So these are going to be 3 of the new bosses. They didn't show off all of them. One of them actually looks just like the ones from Immortal, so we could see kind of more of a crossover in Immortal in terms of the bosses. I know some of you guys might not have played Immortal, but some of these boss fights, the boss looks really cool. So I'm not sure if these are going to be the same bosses that are in Immortal, but in terms of the artwork, it's very, very similar to things that exist in the other Diablo games, so you may see some returning bosses here from the other games. So on top of that, they mentioned some other general improvements. Some small ones over here like Scroll of Escape. If you disconnect on Hardcore, it's going to teleport you to a safe location. Instances now grant a bonus to XP and they persist after death. The biggest thing over here with experience is that the experience bonuses are now multiplicative with the world tier bonus. This is actually massive. So I think they said it was about 40% more XP. And then on top of that, they're going to be allowing us to skip some of the waypoints in terms of acquisition if you've already unlocked them. And then the Renown rewards, which is one of the greatest changes, is it's now going to persist between the seasons and new characters. And then the overworld monsters in World Tier 3 and 4 are no longer going to make the level scale from, like, let's say 50 to 55. The monsters stay at level, let's say 50. Apparently that's not going to be happening anymore. So that's really good because that essentially means more XP. On top of getting the multiplicative XP, this is great. On top of that, in terms of the towns and vendors, we're going to be having more consistent stashes in the town. Not stash space, but more stashes. And then on top of that, they've added some basically more NPCs that would have some of the stuff you want closer. Here was a screenshot of what they showed off. So before, normally you'd have like one stash space, right? But now you can see that there are multiple stash spaces. Usually there's one really close to the waypoint. In terms of a game design decision, I was talking about this with my live stream. I was like, well, why would they just add like several different stashes? There are some that they were showing off that there are several different stash spaces in the same town. From my understanding, they cannot add more stash space because of a game limitation, but they're putting in multiple stashes. Wouldn't that cause the game to have more issues? I don't know. That's the way I see it. But at the end of the day, we're getting more stashes, not stash space. That has to be like that kind of clear. So again, you don't get more storage space. It's just more of them in town. As far as mounts go, they are giving us an update to mounts. They're going to get less likely to get stuck or slow down unexpectedly. I suggested just ignoring unit collision altogether, but it's going to be apparently better. They're increasing the movement speed and it can break some of the destructibles as well. As far as Nightmare Dungeons go, it's now going to teleport you right inside of the Nightmare Dungeon, which is going to be nice. And then on top of that, with the events, the dungeon events density is going to be increased, and the NPCs don't get one shot in the world tiers, and then that are higher. And then traps, the readability is going to be improved, so basically there's going to be less CC. And then the Paragon Glyph experience has been increased. The exact number was 40%. This is still largely quite low, though. I actually suggested like 10x because it's way too slow if you want to level up multiple alts, especially on most players' experience. You're not leveling up all classes to max level. It's pretty unrealistic. Most people burn out by like 70-ish anyways, but if they're giving us way more XP, and on top of that giving us more Glyph XP, we can, in theory, reach higher Nightmare Dungeons earlier, and on top of that, if they make things easier for us to do with these new powers, in theory, we'd be able to clear out the areas faster. They're also doing another change to Nightmare Dungeons where they're going to be having a lot more kill quests. So you're not going to have to basically free these people or do this little mechanic, which is quite nice. My guess is the dungeons that don't have that mechanic are just going to be basically thrown away from the sigils because no one wants to do it. By the way, the Nightmare Dungeons are going to be the exact same in terms of which ones we're doing. They're not rotating the pool or adding just more of them. It's the same exact Nightmare Dungeons, which is honestly kind of underwhelming, and kind of disappointed, to be honest. I would really wish they would add like a bunch more Nightmare Dungeons so we can do more things. So in terms of the Nightmare Dungeon afflictions, the Backstabbers, now it's going to inflict vulnerability, so you're going to be taking more damage. However, you're not going to be taking a multiplier just from straight up that monster. You basically are going to be taking it from more. They said this is supposed to make it easier. Honestly, if you're going to be becoming vulnerable and all the monsters can actually do more damage to you, I mean, logically, I think that that would make it even harder. And then the monster's crit resist, this is actually going to be changed. So monsters' attacks reduce the damage of a crit strike by a duration and it stacks. What this amount is, we don't know, but at the end of the day, it's supposed to make it easier. And then Death Pulse, there's not going to be as many frequent the death pulses, so that should make your character survive more. On top of that, we're supposed to get these changes with resistances. Those resistance changes aren't going to be mentioned in this developer update, but it will be happening later. But at the end of the day, it should make our characters a lot more tanky, unless they're just going to add more damage to the enemies. And on top of that, in terms of Nightmare Dungeons, they've already mentioned that they are going to be changing out the layout, so it's going to be easier, and there's a more direct path. They basically make it so it's a lot easier just to get towards the end of the dungeon versus you have to backtrack. So it's kind of nice for that. And then in terms of the UI fixes, items can now be marked as favorite or junk, so you won't accidentally just have an item in your inventory that you were saving, and you accidentally, when you hit salvage all, you're like, oh man, unlucky. But you can now mark it as favorite, so it will not be sold or salvaged. And then with the extracted aspects, some of the legendary powers will now be grouped together when sorted in the inventory and stash. There is going to be a update to the search, so there is going to be a way for you to search, and you can type this in, by the way, in terms of the stash. So there is going to be some functionality in searching, so that is going to be awesome, so it can be filtered. Now there is no loot filter, but they mentioned in the live stream that that was something that they are working on. So hopefully we're going to get a loot filter eventually for the game. And then on top of that, some of the crafting materials will just drop. Instead of dropping like white and blue items in the later world tiers, you will just get the material. So that's going to really help out with controller players. Like I play PC, and some classes I generally prefer to play with a controller. So what happens is, like, let's say there is a legendary that drops or a unique item, but there's a lot of trash around it. Sometimes you just spam on pickup and it just picks up all the trash. So now instead it's going to be better, and it's going to help out with inventory because you're not going to be able to pick up the trash because it simply does not exist. It just drops as the material that you normally would get with salvage. Speaking of inventory space, gems are no longer going to be granted to you as rewards. So you don't get like gems, you get gem shards, which go into your crafting material. So you don't have to manage gems anymore, but then you just craft the gem. So you still craft the gem and then you socket it in there. And then they mentioned that the enchantment costs are going to be more expensive earlier on, but cheaper later. So that should still make the game cheaper in terms of the itemization, in terms of the cost. So in terms of the new mechanic, I know I just had to be real kind of on loop here. I just want to show you guys the gameplay. There was a lot of just talking. And so over here you can see basically the vampiric powers, which I think is one of the most important things with this gameplay. And you can kind of see how it works. This is just like another screenshot. But in terms of how the mechanic works, you're just going to be going in these newer areas to farm up some of the materials. And if you want to do like the newer bosses, you have to go into the open world. So in terms of my overall thoughts on this, because I was asked about, you know, is this season worth playing? In terms of the mechanic, they didn't really show off the bosses, but there were like these different tiles that you had to like maybe stand on or not stand on. So it seems like the boss fight isn't going to be a face roll, but this is really important right here. They show off basically, this is the new content here, okay? So certain areas of the map will be infected with like the vampire enemies, and they are just basically reskins, but apparently there are newer mechanics that will be introduced with these. But again, we'll have to wait and see if that actually makes a difference. But basically, you go there, you kill them, you get the special things, and you may need to do the whispers to get special things so you can actually fight the brand new bosses. So that's going to wrap it up for everything that you need to know about Season 2. What do you guys think about it? So far, I still want another form of endgame content versus just nightmare dungeons. And there is kind of, and I say kind of because once you get all of the powers, well, you don't really need to do the vampire stuff anymore, right? But then, well, in order to get like the Shaco and the Uber Uniques, you need to get these fragments to actually do them. And you can do this in a party. Here's also the battle pass. There obviously is the skins in the background. You can see the brand new horse. So these are the battle pass rewards. It looks like there's like another form of like this, the Forgotten Ashes that you can get. So you can go ahead and, or is it Smoldering Embers, that you can actually use to increase your character's like progression there, and it's going to automatically claim. And there are free, obviously, rewards as well, but this is kind of the only area where they showed off the battle pass. I'll try to pause it here, but it didn't really show the final tier. Obviously, they kind of want to like lead that up into the later stages. There is a free portal at 49 over here, but they just pause it at the very last moment when they're going to show at the very end. So that's all we got in terms of like the battle pass, the new season mechanic. That's what we're looking at. So again, what are your thoughts down below? Would love to know. But if you guys want to be updated on the new uniques, and there is going to be another update coming on October 10th, and I'll cover that info for you guys. So if you guys want to see it, subscribe, turn that bell, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.